My boyfriend confessed to our couples therapist in front of me that dating me was a YouTube challenge to document life with someone beneath his standards. Dr. Nina Castellanos' office had plants in every corner and that specific shade of blue-gray paint that's supposed to calm anxiety. But nothing could have prepared me for what Austin said when she asked him why he'd been acting distant lately. He leaned back on the cream-colored couch, crossed his arms, and smiled at me before turning to Dr. Castellanos. I should probably just come clean about this whole thing. The relationship was content from the beginning. My YouTube channel needed a boost, and my audience wanted to see if I could date someone average-looking and make it work. It's been almost 2 years now, and honestly, I've gotten some incredible footage. The struggle of being with someone who doesn't fit my usual aesthetic has been pure gold for engagement metrics. His voice carried the same casual tone he used when discussing restaurant reservations or weekend plans, like he was explaining something obvious that I should have figured out months ago. Dr. Castellanos' pen stopped moving mid-note, and she stared at Austin with her mouth slightly open. I felt the room tilt sideways, and my hands started gripping the armrest so hard my knuckles went white. Austin pulled out his phone and started scrolling like this was a normal conversation. I can show you the analytics if you want. The videos where I document the challenges of dating Mara have consistently outperformed my regular content. My subscriber count went from 340,000 to 1.2 million in 18 months. That's the power of authentic struggle content. I'd been working as a technical writer for a medical device company in San Diego for 3 years when Austin messaged me on a dating app. His profile showed someone impossibly attractive, all sharp jawline and perfectly styled hair, the kind of person who seemed 2 leagues above my pay grade. When he matched with me and sent the first message commenting on my bio about loving obscure documentaries, I'd been suspicious. People who looked like Austin didn't usually pursue people who looked like me. I was average height, average build, with glasses and brown hair I usually wore in a ponytail because styling it took too much effort. But Austin had been persistent, charming, asking thoughtful questions about my work and my interests. Our first date was coffee at a place in North Park, and he'd seemed genuinely interested in everything I said, laughing at my jokes and asking follow-up questions. He'd told me he was a content creator focused on lifestyle and personal development, that he made videos about self-improvement and authentic living. He'd been vague about the specifics, saying his channel was growing but he didn't like to brag about numbers. I'd found that humility appealing. We'd started dating exclusively after 3 weeks, and I'd felt like I'd won some kind of lottery. Austin was attentive and affectionate, always suggesting activities and documenting moments with his phone. He'd explained that he captured content constantly for potential videos, that it was just part of being a creator. I'd thought it was slightly annoying but harmless. The first red flag had been subtle, appearing about 2 months into our relationship when Austin had suggested I change my hairstyle. He'd framed it as helpful advice, saying curtain bangs would soften my face and maybe contact lenses instead of glasses would open up my eyes. He'd sent me Instagram links to examples of what he meant, always adding that I'd look so much prettier if I tried these things. I'd been flattered initially that he was thinking about my appearance, trying to help me look my best. But his suggestions had become more frequent and specific. Different makeup techniques to contour my face better, clothing styles that would minimize my less flattering features, workout routines to tone areas he'd identified as problem zones. Each suggestion had come with reassurance that he loved me exactly as I was, but wouldn't I want to be the best version of myself? The second red flag had been his insistence on filming everything. Every date, every casual moment at home, every conversation got captured on his phone or the small camera he carried everywhere. He'd explained that content creators lived documented lives, that capturing authentic moments was essential for his channel. When I'd asked to see his channel, he'd been evasive, saying he kept his personal life separate from his online presence and preferred I didn't watch because it would make our relationship feel performative. I'd accepted that explanation because it seemed thoughtful, like he was protecting our privacy. The third red flag had emerged 6 months into our relationship when Austin's friend group started treating me strangely. We'd gone to a party at his friend Colton's house, and I'd overheard 2 of Austin's friends talking in the kitchen. One had said something about the challenge still going strong and how impressive Austin's commitment was. The other had laughed and said something about the footage being comedy gold. When I'd walked in, they'd stopped talking abruptly and changed the subject with uncomfortable smiles. I'd asked Austin about it later, and he'd dismissed it as guy talk about his YouTube content, nothing for me to worry about. He'd said his friends were jealous of his channel's success and sometimes made jokes about his work. That explanation had made sense at the time, fitting with what I knew about competitive friendships among content creators. But I'd noticed after that party that Austin's friends always seemed to be smirking when they looked at me, like they were in on some joke I didn't understand. When I'd met his family for the first time at his parents' house in La Jolla, his mother had been polite but distant, treating me with the kind of careful courtesy you'd extend to temporary guests. His younger sister had actually laughed when Austin introduced me, quickly covering it with a cough, but the damage was done. I'd felt the weight of being evaluated and found wanting, though Austin had assured me his family just took time to warm up to new people. The suggestion for couples therapy had come from me about 3 months ago, when Austin's behavior had shifted from subtly critical to openly dismissive. He'd started making comments in front of friends about how I didn't understand social media culture, or how my lack of aesthetic sense was endearing in a tragic way. He'd film my reactions to his comments, capturing my confusion and hurt, always claiming later that he was just joking and I was too sensitive. When I'd tried to talk to him about how his behavior made me feel, he'd turned it around, suggesting I was insecure and needed to work on my self-confidence. He'd actually recommended therapy, saying he'd go with me to support my personal growth. I'd agreed because I'd started believing him that maybe I was the problem, that my insecurity was damaging our relationship. I'd found Dr. Castellanos through my insurance provider, a licensed marriage and family therapist with 15 years of experience. Our first 2 sessions had been Austin performing concern and support, talking about how much he loved me while subtly implying I had issues with jealousy and self-worth that needed addressing. Dr. Castellanos had seemed to buy his act, asking me gentle questions about my childhood and my previous relationships, looking for trauma that might explain my relationship difficulties. I'd started to believe their narrative that I was the problem until today's session when Dr. Castellanos had asked Austin directly why he'd been pulling away recently and why he seemed to perform affection rather than feel it. Dr. Castellanos found her voice finally, though it came out tight with barely controlled anger. Mr. Calloway, what you just described is emotional abuse and exploitation. You deliberately deceived Miss Rivera into a relationship for the purpose of creating entertainment content that profits from her humiliation. That's not a relationship. That's a con. Austin shrugged and continued scrolling through his phone. It's not abuse if she got a boyfriend out of it. I provided companionship, emotional support, a relationship experience she probably wouldn't have gotten otherwise. Yeah, I was documenting it for content, but that doesn't negate the value she received. Plus, her face is blurred in the videos, and I never use her real name. I call her the experiment or the subject. It's completely ethical from a content creation standpoint. He turned his phone toward Dr. Castellanos, showing her what appeared to be a YouTube video thumbnail with his face and a blurred figure beside him. This video from 3 months ago got 2.3 million views. The title is Day 487, Dating Below My League, Honest Struggles. People really connect with authentic vulnerability about relationships. Dr. Castellanos leaned forward, her professional composure cracking. You need to leave this office immediately. This session is over. Miss Rivera, please stay. We need to discuss your safety and your options. Austin stood up, pocketing his phone. Whatever. I was done with the experiment anyway. 18 months is plenty of content. I can pivot to new material now. He looked at me directly for the first time since making his confession. No hard feelings, Mara. You should actually thank me. Being part of my channel probably gave your life more meaning than your boring tech writer job ever did. You're famous now. Well, your blurred face is famous. He walked out of Dr. Castellanos' office, closing the door gently behind him like he'd just finished a routine appointment. I sat frozen on the couch, unable to process what had just happened. 18 months of my life, 18 months of intimacy and trust and planning a future together, and it had all been content. Performance? An experiment. Dr. Castellanos moved to sit beside me on the couch, abandoning her usual chair, and her voice was gentle but urgent. Mara, I need you to listen to me very carefully. What Austin just admitted to constitutes fraud, emotional abuse, and potentially violations of California's revenge porn and privacy laws. Those videos he mentioned? If they show you in private moments without your consent, even with your face blurred, that's actionable. But right now, I need to make sure you're okay. Do you have family or friends nearby who can come get you? Someone you can stay with tonight? I shook my head because the truth was I'd isolated myself over the past 18 months. Austin had gradually convinced me that my college friends didn't understand our relationship, that my coworkers were jealous of what we had, that my sister who lived in Phoenix was too judgmental to appreciate Austin's free-spirited lifestyle. I'd pulled away from everyone who cared about me because Austin had made me believe he was enough. Now I understood that isolation had been strategic, making sure I had no one to turn to when the truth came out, ensuring his control over the narrative. Dr. Castellanos pulled out her phone and made a call while I sat there trying to remember how to breathe. She was calling a colleague, describing the situation in clinical terms that made it sound even worse. Patient was in relationship for 18 months. Unaware boyfriend was documenting relationship as YouTube content portraying her as beneath his standards. Boyfriend admitted deception in session today. Showed evidence of videos. Patient is in shock. Needs immediate support and possibly legal intervention. She listened for a moment, then said, Yes, I agree this qualifies as psychological abuse requiring immediate safety planning. Can you take an emergency appointment this afternoon? She hung up and turned to me. I'm sending you to see Dr. Raymond Ortega, a psychologist who specializes in trauma from abusive relationships. His office is 2 floors down in this same building, and he can see you in 30 minutes. In the meantime, I'm going to call a friend of mine who's an attorney specializing in privacy law and digital exploitation. What Austin did may be criminal, and you need legal representation immediately. I managed to find my voice, though it came out smaller than I intended. The videos. How many people have seen them? Dr. Castellanos' expression was pained. Based on what Austin showed me, he has dozens of videos about your relationship with millions of views combined. His channel has over 1 million subscribers. Mara, I'm so sorry, but you need to prepare yourself for the possibility that a lot of people have watched content depicting your relationship without your knowledge or consent. I spent the next hour in Dr. Ortega's office trying to explain what had happened while he took careful notes. Dr. Ortega was in his early 60s with kind eyes and a calm demeanor that made it slightly easier to talk about the humiliation burning through my chest. He explained that what I was experiencing was acute betrayal trauma, that my brain was struggling to reconcile the Austin I thought I knew with the reality of who he actually was. Mara, people who exploit others for entertainment or profit often employ sophisticated manipulation techniques. You're not stupid or naive for believing Austin loved you. He actively worked to make you believe that, to make you dependent on his validation while systematically destroying your self-esteem. That's calculated abuse. He asked specific questions about Austin's behavior patterns, documenting instances of gaslighting, isolation tactics, and public humiliation disguised as jokes. When I told him about Austin's suggestions for changing my appearance, his friends' smirking reactions, and his family's dismissive treatment, Dr. Ortega nodded like he'd seen this pattern before. Austin was training you to accept being treated as less than, making you complicit in your own dehumanization. The fact that he documented it all for profit makes this especially egregious. He pulled out a business card. I'm referring you to Jennifer Laughlin, an attorney who's handled cases involving digital exploitation and privacy violations. She's represented victims of revenge porn and unauthorized recording. What Austin did falls into that category, even with the blurred face, if he filmed you in private settings without your knowledge or consent. I left Dr. Ortega's office with Jennifer Laughlin's contact information and a prescription for anti-anxiety medication to help me through the immediate crisis. He'd also given me a list of resources for domestic violence survivors, explaining that emotional abuse was domestic violence even without physical harm. The building's fluorescent lights felt too bright as I walked to my car, fumbling with my keys because my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I sat in the driver's seat of my Subaru for 20 minutes, staring at my phone, before finally opening YouTube and searching for Austin's channel. I found it immediately. Austin Calloway Lifestyle had 1.3 million subscribers and a polished banner showing Austin in various aspirational poses. The video thumbnails were a gallery of my humiliation. Dating someone average, week 1 struggles. When your girlfriend doesn't understand aesthetics. The experiment, 6-month update. Honest talk, can you date below your league? Each thumbnail showed Austin's face in exaggerated expressions of concern or frustration, and beside him, a blurred female figure that I now recognized as myself. I clicked on the most recent video posted 2 days ago titled, Real Talk, Is This Experiment Worth Continuing? Austin's face filled my phone screen, shot in that perfect ring light glow that influencers use. His voice was earnest and vulnerable as he spoke directly to the camera. Hey everybody, Austin here. I need to be real with you about something I've been struggling with. As you know, for the past 18 months, I've been documenting my relationship with someone who doesn't fit conventional beauty standards. The goal was to challenge myself, to grow as a person, to see if I could find depth and connection with someone I wouldn't normally be attracted to physically. And I want to be honest. It's been hard. Really hard. There are days when I look at her and I feel this disconnect between what I know I should feel and what I actually feel. She's a good person, kind and intelligent, but there's no chemistry for me. The physical attraction just isn't there, and I don't know if it ever will be. He paused, running his hand through his hair in a practiced gesture of vulnerability. I'm questioning whether this experiment has run its course, whether it's fair to either of us to continue. What do you think? Should I keep trying to make this work, or is it time to admit that some gaps just can't be bridged? Let me know in the comments. The video had 3.2 million views and 89,000 comments. I scrolled through the comments and felt physically sick. Thousands of people praising Austin for his honesty and vulnerability. Hundreds calling him inspiring for even attempting to date someone beneath his standards. Some saying he'd already proven his point and should end it. Others encouraging him to keep going to see if he could develop genuine feelings. People were debating my worth as a human being based on my blurred appearance in the background of videos. Someone had commented, "You can tell even with the blur that she's like a 4 at best. Mad respect for you trying this. Most guys wouldn't last 2 months." Another said, "This is the most authentic content I've seen on YouTube. Your struggle is so real." The video was 20 minutes long, and I forced myself to watch all of it. Austin discussed specific moments from our relationship, private conversations and intimate moments I'd thought were between us, all filtered through his lens of struggling to date someone he found unattractive. He talked about how he'd tried to help me improve my appearance with suggestions and guidance, framing it as caring support rather than systematic criticism. He described my emotional reactions to his comments as evidence of insecurity rather than normal responses to cruelty. The entire video was a masterclass in manipulation, making him the hero struggling nobly with an impossible situation, and me the burden he was trying valiantly to carry. I drove home to the apartment I shared with Austin, my mind spinning with questions. How many private moments had he filmed without me knowing? Had there been hidden cameras in our apartment? How much of our relationship had been real versus performed? When I pulled into the parking lot, I saw Austin's Audi already there, and my stomach dropped. I wasn't ready to face him, but I needed to get my things and get out. I walked into our apartment expecting confrontation, but Austin was in the living room packing his camera equipment into cases, completely calm. He looked up when I walked in and smiled like nothing had happened. "Hey, I figured I'd clear out my filming stuff today, make the transition easier for both of us." His casual tone made me want to scream. I found my voice, though it shook with anger I'd been suppressing for 18 months. "How could you do this? How could you make our entire relationship a lie?" Austin continued packing, not even looking at me. "It wasn't a lie. I was genuinely dating you. The fact that I was documenting it doesn't make the relationship fake. I provided emotional labor, companionship, all the things you wanted from a boyfriend. The only difference is I was also creating content. You benefited from the relationship, and I benefited from the content. It's actually pretty fair if you think about it." The casual dismissal of my pain was somehow worse than the initial confession. I walked into our bedroom and started throwing my clothes into suitcases, needing to leave before I completely lost my composure. As I packed, I noticed Austin's laptop on the desk, open and unlocked. Something made me stop and look at the screen. It showed his YouTube channel's video editing interface, and what I saw made my blood run cold. There were dozens of video files organized by date, and the thumbnails showed moments I remembered: private conversations in our bedroom, me crying in the bathroom after particularly cruel comments, intimate moments I'd never consented to being filmed. Austin had cameras positioned throughout our apartment capturing everything. I pulled out my phone and started photographing the screen, documenting the file names, the dates, the thumbnail images. Evidence. Then I noticed a folder labeled Raw Footage, Experiment. I clicked it open and found hundreds of video files going back to our first date. Austin had filmed everything from the beginning with the explicit intention of creating content about dating someone he found unattractive. One video file caught my attention. Pre-planning meeting.mp4, dated 2 months before we'd matched on the dating app. I clicked play and watched Austin sitting with 3 other guys in what looked like his living room, discussing the concept for his new content series. The video showed Austin explaining his plan to his friends, all of whom appeared excited and encouraging. "So here's the pitch," Austin said on the video, leaning forward enthusiastically. "I'm going to create a year-long social experiment. I'll date someone who's like a 4 or 5 out of 10, document the genuine struggle of trying to make myself attracted to someone below my usual standards, and see if I can find meaning in a relationship based purely on personality and connection. The angle is radical honesty about the shallow nature of attraction versus what we're told about inner beauty mattering most." One of his friends, the same Colton who'd hosted that party, nodded and said, "That's actually genius, man. You'll get the people who praise you for being shallow and honest, plus the people who hope you'll learn a lesson about judging people by appearance. Both audiences will watch to see what happens." Another friend added, "Make sure you document everything, even the private stuff. That's where the real honesty comes through. Show the moments when you're struggling not to be repulsed, or when she does something that embarrasses you in public. That's the content that'll go viral." Austin had laughed and agreed, discussing which dating apps would be best for finding his target demographic, and how he'd position himself to attract someone who'd normally be outside his league. I felt like I was going to throw up, but I kept photographing the laptop screen, documenting everything. The video continued with the friends helping Austin craft his dating profile specifically designed to appeal to women with insecurity. They discussed using photos that looked authentic rather than overly polished, mentioning intellectual interests to attract intelligent but conventionally unattractive women, and creating a personality that seemed humble and genuine. It was a hunting strategy. Austin had stalked and trapped me with the precision of someone planning a long-term con. I found more files showing planning documents, spreadsheets tracking view counts and revenue for each video, and a detailed content calendar mapping out storylines for our relationship. Austin had scripted moments, planned conflicts, even scheduled when he'd make specific suggestions about my appearance based on what would create the most compelling narrative for his audience. Our entire relationship had been a production with me as the unwitting star. I copied as many files as I could to my phone's cloud storage, working quickly because I could hear Austin still packing in the living room. Then I found one more folder labeled Endgame Planning and opened it despite knowing it would hurt. The folder contained recent videos of Austin discussing with his friends how he'd end the experiment. They'd debated different scenarios, discussing which ending would generate the most views and discussion. Austin had suggested doing the reveal in couples therapy because the clinical setting would lend credibility and drama. He'd wanted to capture my real-time reaction to the truth, thought that footage would be perfect for the finale episode. That's why he'd agreed to therapy so readily, not to fix our relationship, but to create a dramatic conclusion to his content series. One video showed Austin saying, "The therapist reveal will be perfect. Mara will be completely blindsided and her reaction will be genuine. I'll film it on my phone from an angle that shows her face. That'll be the moment 18 months of content has been building to, the ultimate payoff." I felt physically ill understanding that even today's devastating confession had been performed for content, that Austin had planned my humiliation down to the specific setting and timing. I finished copying files and sent everything to my personal email address as backup, then closed Austin's laptop and continued packing like I'd never seen it. My mind was racing with rage and the beginning of a plan. Austin had created this content for his audience. Maybe it was time for a much larger audience to see what he'd really done. I left the apartment with 3 suitcases and drove to my sister's place in Phoenix. The 5-hour drive gave me time to process the magnitude of Austin's betrayal and plan my next steps. Elena, my older sister by 4 years, had never liked Austin, though she'd been too polite to say so directly. When I showed up at her door at midnight with suitcases and tears, she didn't ask questions, just pulled me inside and made tea while I explained everything. Elena's face went through shock, horror, and rage as I told her about the therapy session, the videos, the evidence I'd copied from Austin's laptop. That psychopath filmed you without consent and posted it online for money? Mara, that's illegal. That's so far past illegal, I don't even know where to start. She grabbed her own laptop and pulled up Austin's YouTube channel, and we spent the next 2 hours going through his videos, cataloging every violation. The videos showed me in our apartment, walking around in my pajamas, having private conversations, doing normal life things I'd never agreed to have filmed or broadcast. Even with my face blurred, my identity was discoverable through context clues. He'd mentioned my job, my location, details about my life that made me identifiable to anyone who knew me. Elena screenshotted everything and organized it into folders, her project management skills from her job kicking into efficiency mode. We're building a case. First thing tomorrow, you're calling that attorney Dr. Castellanos recommended. Then we're going to systematically destroy Austin's career. She looked at me seriously. I know you're hurt right now, and you probably want to disappear and pretend this never happened. But that's what he's counting on. He thinks you'll be too humiliated to fight back. He thinks he can just walk away from this and move on to his next content series. We're not letting that happen. She was right. The humiliation was crushing. Knowing that millions of people had watched content depicting my relationship as a burden my boyfriend was nobly struggling with. But underneath the humiliation was anger. White-hot rage that Austin had stolen 18 months of my life, used me for profit, and planned to just move on without consequences. Elena helped me draft emails to Jennifer Laughlin, the attorney Dr. Castellanos had recommended, attaching all the evidence I'd gathered from Austin's laptop. We sent the emails at 2:30 in the morning, and Elena made me promise I'd sleep before dealing with anything else. But I couldn't sleep. I lay in her guest room staring at the ceiling, replaying moments from my relationship with Austin and seeing them differently now. Every kindness had been calculated, every intimate moment had been content. Every time I'd trusted him, he'd been betraying me. Jennifer Laughlin called me at 8:45 the next morning, which was 6:45 Phoenix time. I answered groggily, and her voice was crisp and professional. Miss Rivera, I reviewed the materials you sent last night. What Austin Calloway did to you violates California's privacy laws, potentially constitutes fraud, and depending on the content of the videos, might include elements of revenge porn under California Penal Code 647, J4. I want to meet with you as soon as possible to discuss filing both civil and criminal complaints. She explained that California law prohibited recording someone in private spaces without their consent, that Austin's videos showed me in my own home engaged in private activities, and that he'd profited from those recordings. Even with your face blurred, the videos are potentially actionable. The fact that he planned this from the beginning, that he deliberately deceived you into a relationship for the purpose of creating exploitative content, strengthens your case significantly. The evidence you copied from his laptop showing premeditation is exactly what we need. She scheduled a meeting for that afternoon at her office in downtown San Diego and told me to bring any other documentation I had of the relationship. Phone records, text messages, receipts, anything showing the timeline and nature of our relationship would help establish the fraud. I drove back to San Diego that afternoon, and Elena came with me, refusing to let me face this alone. Jennifer Laughlin's office was on the 15th floor of a high-rise with views of the harbor. She was in her early 40s with short blonde hair and the intense focus of someone who'd spent years fighting predators. We sat in her conference room while I told her everything from Austin's first message on the dating app to yesterday's confession in therapy. Jennifer took detailed notes, asking clarifying questions about specific incidents and filming. Did you ever see cameras in your apartment? Did Austin ever tell you he was filming? I explained that Austin had always had his phone or camera out, that I'd assumed it was just his content creator lifestyle, but I'd never imagined he was filming intimate private moments, or that I was the subject of his content. Jennifer nodded. That's important. You never consented to being filmed, and you certainly never consented to the recordings being published online. California law is very clear about this. The recordings themselves are illegal, and publishing them compounds the violation. She pulled up Austin's YouTube channel on her laptop. I reviewed his channel this morning. He has 127 videos featuring you either directly or discussed explicitly. The combined views exceed 85 million. The videos have generated substantial ad revenue, probably in the range of $200,000 to $300,000 based on typical YouTube earnings. Austin profited significantly from exploiting you. Jennifer outlined a two-pronged legal strategy. First, she'd file a civil lawsuit for invasion of privacy, fraud, and intentional infliction of emotional distress, seeking damages for both compensation and punishment. Second, she'd file a criminal complaint with the San Diego District Attorney's Office alleging violations of California's privacy and recording laws. The criminal charges will take longer and depend on whether the DA decides to prosecute, but the civil case we can control. I'll also send Austin a cease and desist letter demanding he immediately remove all videos featuring you and preserve all evidence for the lawsuit. That letter will go out today. She explained that removing the videos wouldn't eliminate my case because the damage was already done and because she'd archived everything. Even if Austin deletes every video today, we have evidence of what he posted and how long it was available. The screenshots and recordings you took of his laptop showing premeditation are crucial. Those videos of him planning the experiment prove fraudulent intent from the beginning. Jennifer estimated the civil case would take 12 to 18 months to resolve, either through settlement or trial. Austin will probably want to settle to avoid the publicity of trial, but we'll see. Some people are arrogant enough to think they can win even when the evidence is overwhelming. I authorized Jennifer to proceed with both legal strategies, signing retainer agreements and authorizing her to act on my behalf. She asked about my financial situation, and I explained I had about $18,000 in savings and a steady income from my technical writing job. Jennifer quoted her fees at $400 per hour, but said she'd work on a partial contingency basis, taking a percentage of any settlement or judgment in addition to hourly fees. This case has strong publicity potential, which works in our favor. Media attention will pressure Austin to settle and will deter other content creators from similar exploitation. I'm going to reach out to some journalist contacts who cover digital ethics and privacy issues. Are you comfortable with media exposure? The question gave me pause because media exposure meant more people knowing what happened, meant reliving the humiliation publicly. But Elena squeezed my hand and said, "He already exposed you to millions of people. The difference is now you get to control the narrative." She was right. Austin had crafted the story with himself as the struggling hero and me as the burden. Media coverage would let me tell the truth about what he'd done. Jennifer sent the cease and desist letter to Austin that afternoon via email and certified mail. The letter demanded Austin immediately remove all videos featuring me, issue a public statement acknowledging he'd filmed and posted content without consent, and preserve all evidence including raw footage and financial records. She gave him 48 hours to comply before filing the civil lawsuit. Austin responded within 3 hours through his own attorney, a man named Richard Foley who specialized in defending content creators. Foley's response denied all allegations, claimed the videos were protected free speech, stated that I'd been aware of Austin's filming and had implicitly consented by remaining in the relationship, and threatened to countersue for defamation if we proceeded. Jennifer laughed when she read Foley's letter. "That's the response I expected. He's bluffing. The implicit consent argument won't hold up because you were never informed about the nature or scope of the filming. The free speech defense doesn't apply to illegal recordings, and the defamation threat is baseless because truth is an absolute defense. Foley knows he has a terrible case, and he's hoping to intimidate you into backing down." She filed the civil lawsuit the next morning in San Diego Superior Court, and the complaint was detailed and devastating. It laid out Austin's premeditated plan to deceive me into a relationship for content creation purposes, documented the extent of his filming and publication without consent, calculated the financial profit he'd gained from exploiting me, and sought $2.5 million in damages plus attorney fees. The lawsuit became public record immediately, and within hours, news outlets had picked up the story. YouTube star sued for secretly filming girlfriend as content experiment. Content creator accused of exploitative relationship for clicks. Woman sues boyfriend who revealed relationship was YouTube challenge. The articles detailed Austin's confession in therapy, his videos depicting me as beneath his standards, and my claims that I'd never consented to being filmed or featured in content. Some outlets embedded clips from Austin's videos, blurring my face but showing his commentary about struggling to date someone he found unattractive. The public reaction was swift and brutal. Austin's comment sections filled with people calling him exploitative, manipulative, and abusive. His subscriber count started dropping, hundreds of thousands of people unsubscribing in protest. Sponsorship deals got canceled as companies distanced themselves from the controversy. Within 48 hours of the lawsuit filing, Austin had lost over 300,000 subscribers, multiple brand partnerships, and his reputation in the content creator community. But he still hadn't taken down the videos. Jennifer filed for a temporary restraining order requiring Austin to remove all content featuring me while the lawsuit was pending. The hearing was scheduled for the following week, and Jennifer said she'd argue that leaving the videos up caused ongoing harm through continued privacy violations. In the meantime, she sent the criminal complaint to the San Diego District Attorney's Office with a cover letter explaining why prosecution was warranted. Criminal charges will depend on whether the DA thinks the case is strong enough and whether they have resources to prosecute, but the complaint creates a record and additional pressure on Austin. I went back to work that week, taking advantage of my company's remote work policy to work from Elena's place in Phoenix while everything unfolded. My coworkers had seen the news coverage because someone had recognized my name and connected it to the lawsuit. My manager, Kevin Thornton, called me into a virtual meeting to ask if I needed additional time off or accommodations. "Mara, I can't imagine what you're going through. If you need to take leave or adjust your schedule, let me know. Your well-being is more important than deadlines." His support meant more than he probably realized, a reminder that not everyone in my life had been part of Austin's deception. The restraining order hearing happened on a Monday morning in a courtroom that felt too formal for the digital age violation we were discussing. Judge Stephanie Kwan presided, a woman in her 50s with a reputation for being tough on privacy violations. Jennifer presented evidence of Austin's videos, playing clips that showed blurred footage of me in our apartment during private moments. She argued that every day the videos remained online caused continued harm through ongoing privacy violations and public humiliation. Your Honor, Mr. Calloway has broadcast Ms. Rivera's private life to over 85 million viewers without her knowledge or consent. He's profited substantially from this exploitation. Leaving the videos online while this litigation proceeds compounds the harm and constitutes ongoing harassment. Austin's attorney, Richard Foley, argued that removing the videos would destroy Austin's livelihood and violate his First Amendment rights as a content creator. Your Honor, these videos represent Mr. Calloway's professional work product and his primary source of income. Ordering their removal without a full trial violates his free speech rights and causes irreparable financial harm. Furthermore, Ms. Rivera was aware Mr. Calloway was a content creator and had ample opportunity to object to his filming practices during their relationship. Judge Kwan asked Austin directly whether he'd informed me that I was the subject of his content or that he was filming me for his YouTube channel. Austin hesitated, then said, "I told her I was a content creator and that I filmed frequently. She was aware of my professional activities." Judge Kwan's expression sharpened. "That's not what I asked, Mr. Calloway. Did you specifically inform Ms. Rivera that she was the subject of your videos? That you were filming her in private moments? And that you were posting that content online?" Austin shifted uncomfortably. "Not in those exact words, but she could have asked to see my channel at any time." Judge Kwan turned to her clerk. "I'm going to review some of Mr. Calloway's video content before making a ruling. We'll recess for 30 minutes. She watched several of Austin's videos on her laptop during the recess, and when court resumed, her expression was cold. "I've reviewed multiple videos from Mr. Calloway's channel, including content where he explicitly discusses dating Ms. Rivera as an experiment and refers to her as beneath his standards. This content is not ambiguous. Mr. Calloway clearly positioned Ms. Rivera as the subject of a social experiment without her knowledge. The videos show her in private settings and moments she clearly had no idea were being filmed or broadcast. This constitutes ongoing invasion of privacy. The temporary restraining order is granted. Mr. Calloway, you have 24 hours to remove all content featuring Ms. Rivera from your channel. Failure to comply will result in contempt of court charges and potential criminal penalties." Austin's face went pale as Judge Kwan issued the order. Foley immediately began arguing about the financial impact and whether the order could be stayed pending appeal, but Judge Kwan shut him down. "The financial impact of Mr. Calloway's illegal activity benefiting him is not grounds to continue violating Ms. Rivera's privacy. The order stands. Remove the content within 24 hours. Walking out of the courthouse, I felt the first real sense of vindication. Austin would have to delete the videos that had been his primary source of income and validation. His audience would see that the content had been forced down by court order, raising questions about why. Jennifer smiled as we walked to her car. "That went better than expected." Judge Kwan clearly saw through Austin's arguments. Now we wait to see if he complies or if he's stupid enough to defy a court order. 23 hours later, Austin complied. Every video featuring me disappeared from his channel, leaving gaps in his content history that his remaining subscribers noticed immediately. Comments flooded his other videos asking what happened, where the relationship content went, whether the lawsuit allegations were true. Austin posted a vague statement saying he was removing content out of respect for privacy during ongoing legal proceedings, but the damage was done. The sudden removal of 127 videos confirmed there was validity to my claims. The lawsuit moved into discovery, the phase where both sides could demand evidence from each other. Jennifer submitted extensive discovery requests asking for all raw footage Austin had filmed, all financial records showing revenue from the videos, all communications with his friends about the experiment, and depositions from Austin and anyone involved in planning or executing the content series. Austin's attorney fought every request, claiming they were overly broad or violated attorney-client privilege, but Judge Kwan consistently ruled in our favor, ordering Austin to produce the requested materials. When Austin finally turned over the raw footage files, Jennifer and I spent days reviewing them with a media forensics expert she'd hired. The footage was even worse than I'd imagined. Austin had hidden cameras throughout our apartment in the bedroom, bathroom, living room, capturing thousands of hours of my private life. The bedroom footage showed intimate moments I'd never imagined were being recorded. The bathroom camera had captured me in various states of undress. The living room footage showed private conversations, arguments, moments of vulnerability. Austin had surveilled me completely without my knowledge. The media expert, Dr. Sharon Vega, with 20 years of experience in digital forensics, compiled a report documenting the scope of Austin's recording. Ms. Rivera was under constant surveillance in her own home. The recordings include footage that would qualify as voyeuristic under California law. Mr. Calloway recorded Ms. Rivera in states of undress, in private moments during intimate activities, all without consent. This goes beyond invasion of privacy into potentially criminal voyeurism. Jennifer amended our lawsuit to include additional claims based on the raw footage discovery, adding counts for voyeurism and seeking enhanced damages for the systematic nature of Austin's surveillance. This is worse than we originally alleged. Austin didn't just film you occasionally for content. He ran a complete surveillance operation on you. That's illegal wiretapping, voyeurism, and stalking behavior in addition to the privacy violations. She scheduled depositions of Austin and his friends who'd appeared in the planning video. The depositions would force them to testify under oath about the experiment, creating a permanent record of their involvement. Austin's deposition was scheduled first, taking place in Jennifer's conference room with court reporters documenting everything. Austin showed up looking significantly worse than when I'd last seen him, having lost weight and developed an anxious energy. Jennifer questioned him methodically about the origin of the experiment idea, the planning process, the filming setup, and his intent in creating the content. Austin tried to minimize everything, claiming the experiment had been about personal growth rather than exploitation, that he'd genuinely cared about me despite the content premise, that the hidden cameras had been for security rather than filming purposes. Jennifer pulled out the pre-planning video showing Austin discussing targeting less attractive women for maximum narrative impact. Mr. Calloway, in this video, you and your friends explicitly discuss finding someone who is, quote, a 4 or 5 out of 10 for your experiment. Does that sound like personal growth or exploitation? Austin's attorney objected repeatedly, claiming the questions were argumentative or beyond the scope of the case. But Jennifer was relentless, walking Austin through every video he'd created, every moment he'd filmed without consent, every dollar he'd earned from my humiliation. By the end of the 8-hour deposition, Austin had admitted under oath that he'd never told me about the experiment, that I'd never consented to being filmed in our apartment, that he'd hidden cameras specifically to capture content without my awareness, and that he'd earned over $280,000 from videos featuring me. All of this was now part of the official record, statements he couldn't take back or deny later. The depositions of Austin's friends were equally damning. Colton, the friend who'd encouraged Austin to document private moments, admitted they'd all known the experiment was exploitative but had thought it was entertaining content. Yeah, we knew Mara didn't know she was being filmed for the channel. That was kind of the whole point. If she'd known, she would have acted differently, and the content wouldn't have been authentic. We thought it was genius at the time. Now I realize it was just cruel. Each friend who'd participated in planning or encouraging the experiment gave similar testimony, creating a record of conspiracy and premeditation that strengthened our case significantly. 3 months into the lawsuit, the San Diego District Attorney's Office announced they were filing criminal charges against Austin for violations of California Penal Code 647-J, unlawful recording and distribution of intimate images. The DA's press release stated that Austin had recorded me in private moments and distributed those recordings for profit, meeting the legal definition of criminal voyeurism. Mr. Calloway's actions constitute serious violations of privacy laws designed to protect individuals from exploitation. Our office takes these cases seriously and will prosecute to the fullest extent of the law. The criminal charges meant Austin now faced both civil liability and potential jail time. Jennifer explained that the criminal case would proceed separately from our civil lawsuit, but would help our case by establishing the illegal nature of Austin's conduct. A criminal conviction makes our civil case significantly stronger. It establishes that Austin's behavior was illegal, not just unethical or inappropriate. The media coverage intensified as the criminal charges became public, with news outlets running stories about the content creator who'd allegedly committed crimes against his girlfriend for YouTube views. Austin's remaining subscribers abandoned him in droves, his channel hemorrhaging followers until his count dropped below 200,000. Brand partnerships that hadn't already left now terminated contracts. Other content creators publicly condemned him, distancing themselves from his behavior and apologizing for having associated with him. The criminal trial began 6 months after the charges were filed, and I was called as the prosecution's primary witness. The prosecutor, Deputy District Attorney Monica Ramirez, with 15 years of experience trying cybercrimes and privacy violation cases, prepared me thoroughly for testimony. Mara, the defense is going to try to make this about the relationship ending badly rather than about Austin's criminal behavior. Stay focused on the facts. You never consented to being filmed. You never knew about the cameras or the content. Austin lied to you for 18 months while profiting from your exploitation. Those are the facts that matter. Testifying was one of the hardest things I'd ever done, sitting in the witness box while Austin sat at the defense table avoiding eye contact. Monica walked me through the timeline of our relationship, the discovery of Austin's videos, the hidden cameras in our apartment, the impact on my life. When she asked me to describe finding out the truth, I had to pause to compose myself. Learning that 18 months of my life had been fake, that someone I loved had been using me for content, that millions of people had watched videos depicting me as someone my boyfriend struggled to tolerate because I wasn't attractive enough, it destroyed my sense of reality. I questioned everything about myself, every judgment I'd ever made. Austin didn't just violate my privacy. He made me doubt my own worth as a person. The defense attorney, a different lawyer than Foley because Austin couldn't afford high-end representation anymore, tried to suggest I'd known about the filming and had implicitly consented by staying in the relationship. Miss Rivera, isn't it true that Mr. Calloway frequently had cameras and his phone out filming? Isn't it true you knew he was a content creator? I looked at the jury directly when I answered. Yes, Austin often had cameras out, but there's a difference between knowing someone creates content and knowing you're the content. I never knew he was filming me in our bedroom, our bathroom, during private moments. I never knew he'd positioned hidden cameras throughout our apartment. I never knew he was posting videos about our relationship with me as the subject. If I'd known any of that, I would have left immediately. The jury seemed to believe me, several nodding as I spoke. The prosecution presented the raw footage showing hidden camera angles I'd never have agreed to, presented Austin's planning videos proving premeditation, and brought in Dr. Ortega to testify about the psychological impact of the exploitation. The defense tried to argue Austin hadn't technically distributed intimate images because my face was blurred and I wasn't engaging in sexual activity in the videos. But Monica countered that California law didn't require sexual content to qualify as unlawful recording in private places, that filming someone without consent in their bedroom and bathroom was inherently voyeuristic regardless of what activities were shown. The jury deliberated for less than 5 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. Austin showed no emotion as the verdicts were read, just stared straight ahead like he'd already accepted his fate. Judge Kwan scheduled sentencing for 6 weeks later and revoked Austin's bail given the guilty verdicts. Austin was taken into custody immediately, led out of the courtroom in handcuffs while reporters documented his perp walk. The sentencing hearing brought closure I hadn't expected. Multiple victims of Austin's exploitation came forward, women he'd dated briefly before me who'd discovered after his arrest that he'd also filmed them without consent for earlier content experiments. Judge Kwan heard testimony from 5 women total, each describing how Austin had violated their privacy and used them for content. Dr. Ortega testified about the lasting psychological impact of this kind of exploitation, explaining that betrayal trauma from intimate partners could cause PTSD symptoms lasting years. When it was my turn to give a victim impact statement, I'd prepared carefully, wanting to convey both the harm Austin had caused and my refusal to be defined by his abuse. Austin Calloway spent 18 months systematically destroying my self-esteem while documenting my humiliation for profit. He filmed me without consent in the most private moments of my life. He made me believe I was unworthy of love unless I changed everything about myself. He isolated me from friends and family so I'd have no support when the truth came out. But he failed to destroy me. I'm still here. I've rebuilt my life. I've learned that his cruelty reflected his own brokenness, not my worth. I want him held accountable not just for what he did to me, but to deter other content creators from similar exploitation. Judge Kwan sentenced Austin to 3 years in state prison followed by 5 years of probation with strict conditions, including no creation of content involving other people without documented written consent. Mr. Calloway, you exploited a vulnerable person for entertainment and profit. You violated privacy laws, betrayed trust, and caused significant psychological harm. Your behavior represents exactly the kind of exploitation these laws were designed to prevent. The sentence reflects both punishment for your actions and deterrence for others who might consider similar conduct. Austin finally showed emotion, tears streaming down his face as he realized he'd be spending years in prison. But I felt nothing watching him cry. He'd had so many opportunities to stop, to tell the truth, to take responsibility, and he'd chosen exploitation every time. The civil lawsuit settled 2 weeks after Austin's sentencing. His attorney approached Jennifer with a settlement offer now that Austin had been convicted criminally. The settlement terms included $1.8 million in damages paid from Austin's remaining assets and future earnings, a permanent injunction preventing Austin from ever posting content featuring me, a public apology statement admitting wrongdoing and acknowledging the harm he caused, and Austin's agreement to participate in a documentary about digital exploitation to educate content creators about ethical boundaries. Jennifer negotiated the terms carefully, ensuring the settlement included provisions that Austin couldn't profit from his story through books, media appearances, or future content about the case. The public apology Austin issued as part of the settlement was carefully worded by his attorneys, but still damning. I, Austin Calloway, admit that I deliberately deceived Mara Rivera into a relationship for the purpose of creating YouTube content. I filmed her without consent in private moments, published content exploiting her for profit, and systematically undermined her self-esteem as part of my content narrative. I violated her privacy, betrayed her trust, and caused significant harm for my own financial gain. My actions were illegal, unethical, and inexcusable. I take full responsibility for the pain I caused Mara, and acknowledge that no apology can undo the damage. I'm committed to serving my sentence, making restitution, and ensuring no one else is exploited in similar ways. The statement went viral, shared across social media platforms as an example of content creator abuse. It became required reading in digital ethics courses, and was cited in articles about the dark side of influencer culture. 1 year after Austin's confession in therapy, I was invited to speak at a digital ethics conference about my experience. Standing in front of 500 content creators, platform representatives, and media scholars, I told my story in detail. I explained how Austin had weaponized intimacy for content, how he'd hidden behind free speech arguments to justify exploitation, and how platforms needed better protections for people featured in content without consent. The audience listened in silence, and during the question session, multiple content creators asked how they could ensure their own practices were ethical. I told them the answer was simple: get explicit, informed, documented consent from anyone featured in content, especially intimate or private content. The conference led to policy changes at YouTube and other platforms, implementing stronger requirements for creators to document consent from people featured in videos. The Mara Rivera Rule, as some outlets called it, required creators to submit consent forms for individuals prominently featured in content, particularly in relationship or lifestyle videos. Violations could result in channel termination and legal liability. My lawsuit and Austin's conviction had created precedent that privacy laws applied to content creation, that filming someone without consent was illegal even if done for entertainment purposes, and that platforms had responsibility to prevent exploitation. 2 years after everything started, I was interviewed for a documentary about digital exploitation that included Austin's case alongside other instances of content creators abusing power. The documentary, Behind the Filter: The Cost of Content, won awards at film festivals and streaming platforms, bringing attention to systemic issues in influencer culture. Watching the documentary felt strange, seeing my story presented alongside others, understanding that Austin's exploitation wasn't unique, but part of a broader pattern of content creators treating people as disposable content resources. I moved back to San Diego after Austin went to prison, reclaiming the city as mine rather than his. I got therapy with Dr. Ortega weekly for 2 years, working through the betrayal trauma and rebuilding my sense of self. The settlement money gave me financial security I'd never had before, and I used it to finish a graduate degree in digital privacy law, channeling my experience into expertise. Elena and I remained close, our relationship strengthened by her fierce advocacy during my worst moments. I started dating again eventually, though trust came slowly. The first time a new boyfriend pulled out his phone to take a photo, I had a panic attack so severe we had to stop the date. But with therapy and time, I learned to distinguish between normal documentation of life and exploitative surveillance. 3 years after the confession, I got an email from Austin. He was still in prison and wanted to apologize again, to explain himself, to ask for forgiveness. I deleted the email without reading beyond the first paragraph. Austin had already taken enough of my time and energy. I didn't owe him absolution or understanding. His consequences were justice, not tragedy. 4 years after everything started, I met someone who understood boundaries instinctively. Lucas was a professor of ethics at UC San Diego, and when I told him my story on our third date, he asked what consent would look like in our relationship. I never want you to feel surveilled or documented without clear agreement. How do we make sure you feel safe? That question, that acknowledgement that my boundaries mattered, meant more than any apology Austin could have given. Austin got released on parole after serving 2 years of his 3-year sentence, and I heard through media coverage that he'd moved to a different state, barred by his probation terms from creating any online content involving other people. His YouTube channel stayed deleted, his social media presence minimal, his influencer career destroyed completely. The $1.8 million settlement had been paid through liquidation of his assets and a payment plan from his future earnings, though he'd never again earn the kind of money he'd made exploiting me. Some people argued the punishment was too harsh, that Austin had been young and made mistakes. But mistakes implied accidents. Austin's exploitation had been deliberate, planned, sustained over 18 months while I begged him to stop criticizing me, while I cried in bathrooms he'd bugged with cameras, while I defended him to concerned friends and family. His prison sentence and ruined career weren't injustice. They were accountability. 5 years after the therapy session where my world imploded, I stood in front of a college classroom teaching a course on digital privacy and ethics. My students knew my story because it was part of the curriculum, an example of exploitation in the attention economy. Some of them had been Austin's viewers, had watched his content before understanding what it represented. They asked thoughtful questions about where the line was between authentic content creation and exploitation, about how to build audiences without dehumanizing subjects, about responsibility in the age of constant documentation. I told them that content creation wasn't inherently unethical, but it required recognizing that people weren't props in your narrative. Austin's crime wasn't making videos. It was treating me as less than human, as a character in his story rather than a person with autonomy. That's what separates ethical content from exploitation. Do you see the people you film as collaborators with their own agency, or as resources to extract value from? The question challenged them, forced them to examine their own practices on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube. Some admitted they'd never thought about the people in their content as having separate interests from their own. That realization was the point. Austin's exploitation of me had taught millions of people what abuse looked like in the digital age. His destroyed career and prison sentence had taught content creators that exploitation had consequences. The policies implemented after my lawsuit protected future victims from similar abuse. The settlement money had funded my education and advocacy work. Austin had tried to use me for content that elevated him. Instead, his abuse became content that protected others. The revenge wasn't just his imprisonment or his ruined career. The revenge was that his cruelty created exactly the opposite outcome he'd intended. He'd wanted to build an empire on my humiliation. Instead, he destroyed himself and built protections that would prevent others from following his path. I'm 32 now, working as a consultant for tech platforms on privacy and consent policies, married to Lucas, living a life Austin tried to convince me I didn't deserve. We have a daughter named Isabel who will grow up in a world slightly safer because her mother fought back against exploitation and won. When she's old enough, I'll tell her about Austin, about the man who tried to make me believe I was worthless and how that lie became his downfall. I'll teach her that her worth isn't determined by how others perceive her, that relationships require respect and consent, that fame and money never justify treating people as less than human. Sometimes I still have nightmares about discovering the cameras, about that moment in therapy when Austin casually destroyed our relationship. But I also dream about the courtroom where he was sentenced, about the moment Judge Kwan said his behavior represented exactly what these laws were meant to prevent. I dream about speaking to audiences who thank me for having the courage to tell my story. I dream about students who change their content practices because they learned what exploitation looks like. Austin thought documenting me would be his greatest success. He was right that our relationship became his defining achievement, just not the way he'd planned. His exploitation of me became the story that ended him, and I'm no longer the victim of his narrative. I'm the author of my own story now. And in my story, the woman he tried to break became stronger, louder, more powerful than he'd ever imagined possible. That truth is the final video he never got to post. The one where his experiment realizes she was always above his standards. She just didn't know it yet. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.